Good morning. It's Bernard Nomberg with another weekly episode of NOMBERG LAW Live. We appreciate you guys spending a few minutes with us. I've got my buddy Richard Rice. Good morning, Richard.
Hey,
good to see you, buddy.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Richard is an attorney here in town, and he does so much more than that. He's involved in the community. He's got a podcast, a radio show that is also on Facebook Live, and I think it's part of a podcast, but we'll get into all of that part in just a few minutes. But we're going to take a few minutes and talk about Richard's past and where he's from. I think aren't you from Huntsville originally?
That's right. I'm originally from Huntsville, and I grew up in Madison, Alabama.
That's right.
Yeah, graduated from Bob Jones High School in 2000. It doesn't seem like it was almost 20 years ago. I know people always say that, but it's so true. It really is. It doesn't seem. Time flies, and
well, it does, particularly when you're enjoying what you're doing.
Right.
And I see. I've had the pleasure and honor being on your show a few months ago, and I appreciate that. But I try to tune in each weekend when you guys have different guests going on, and we'll get into the specifics in a minute.
Yeah.
But my point being is you're enjoying what you're doing. And I was just talking about that the other day with David. Is time just flies by, and it's all good stuff. And look who just popped in. Can you see? Hey, Eva, good to see you. I knew we'd get a chance to say hello to her at some point. But Richard, tell the folks, you've got the Rice Law Firm here in town, downtown.
That's right.
And you do, it's a wide variety practice, but share with the people who don't know you, what kind of practice, what do y'all do? What do you concentrate on?
Well, like you said, it is a general practice in a lot of regards. And I started practicing law in 2010, and I really got kind of got started doing primarily consumer law issues, and that included consumer bankruptcies, but it also included debt collection issues with the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And in 2010, that was really on, I want to say, the tail end of the mortgage crisis. And so there were so many people who were coming to me. They were thinking about bankruptcy, but the primary issue was some type of issue with their mortgage. They'd fallen behind on their mortgage because of some type of interest rate that had increased, or a balloon payment, something along those lines. And so that put me in a position where I really began to look at some of the laws that regulated how mortgages are supposed to be serviced. And so for maybe about the first 3 years of our practice, we had a general practice that dealt with a lot of different civil issues, but that was really my primary focus, was consumer law. And my specialty at that time was mortgages. And I still do some of that work today. And kind of since that time, beginning with consumer law, I branched out some and started to do more civil rights cases around police misconduct, prisoner abuse cases. That's probably about a third of my practice right now.
Unfortunately, there's still a lot of that.
That's true. There is. And there's a lot of, law enforcement officials who do a great job, and we try to highlight them as well and work with them in the community. But, we also want to create accountability. That's the type of society that we exist in, and we all want to hold each other accountable in those type of situations. So, those are the two areas: civil rights, consumer law. And then I do quite a bit of consulting with nonprofit organizations. I serve on several boards of directors, and I consult with nonprofits about strategic planning and just basic formation issues that may come up, and we work with a grant writer that helps us kind of put together an overall package for various nonprofits. So I really try to go, to the areas where I'm passionate about. I balance that, obviously, from a practical standpoint with other work too. But I really, try to do the type of work that's fulfilling to me and that's rewarding at the end of the day.
And that's what you just said is just so vitally important, because if you don't enjoy what you do, then you're miserable.
Right.
And if you're miserable, you consider it a job, not your profession.
That's right.
And that makes all the difference in the world. And you and I could talk about that part for so long. And actually next week, I'm going to talk to a woman. We're going to talk about life-work balances. But going back to your community involvement, and from what I've seen from your show, Results with Richard, is that seems to be one of the focuses, because I know you're so heavily involved in a lot of community projects and a lot of community organizations.
Right.
Let's talk about Results with Richard.
Sure.
Where and we'll put it in the comments section about how you can tune in, how you can get in touch. But Richard, tell us a little bit about the program. Tell us who's on the program. What's the focus? What are your goals there?
Right. So Results with Richard Rice is a radio show on 101.1 FM. And we record the show. We stream it live as well. So we're multicasting. We stream it live, we record it, and then we take that recording and we post it at resultswithrichard.com. That's resultswithrichard.com. And then it's also posted on my firm's website. Those previous episodes are at thericefirmllc.com.
And again, we'll put all of the contact websites and how to get in touch with you and the show in the comments section.
Right. And so those are all of our previous episodes are there. We started the show a little bit over 6 months ago. And I had a little bit of a background in radio before that because I've been working on a show called Knowledge is Power on Sundays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. on V94.9 FM, which is located in Hensley. And it's actually a station that's owned by a fellow attorney, Courtney French. And he recently, maybe about a year and a half or 2 years ago, purchased the station. And so I have been working with them on Knowledge is Power previous to starting Results with Richard Rice. And I thought that it'd be a good idea for us to start Results because so many of the issues we address can be either avoidable if we take proactive action, or in order for us to sufficiently address the underlying issues that put people in the legal situation, we sometimes have to step outside the courtroom, and to be able to fully address it.
Wait, burying your head in the sand, that doesn't get it done.
No, and sometimes as a lawyer, that's something that we feel that way though. Yeah. It's easy to focus on that.
Oh, it'll go away. Yeah. I'll just ignore it. It'll go away.
That's it.
Yeah, that rarely ever happens.
It really does.
In a good way.
I know. And so just being, like you said, being involved in the community and wanting to see things change, then I wanted to be able to put my experience out there and bring other experts onto the show to talk about these issues from an aspect of, one, how can we collectively work to address some of the common issues in our community in a proactive fashion? So that's really the primary objective of the show.
Well, the episodes, and I've listened to parts of 5 or 6 different weeks that you've been on, and it seems you're bringing on different experts in different fields to talk about.
Right.
And I know that April is National Fair Housing Month. So I want to talk about that. We're at the conclusion of April. And I know you've had some people on recently to talk about that, but it's such a very under-discussed topic, but it affects so many people in our community.
Right.
Let's, as a broad stroke, tell us, what is that? What is National Fair Housing Month?
Well, National Fair Housing Month is an initiative to bring attention to the issue of fair housing. And fair housing really, it pertains to, making sure that we have equity in housing. Housing is such a fundamental need. It's a fundamental need for everybody. We have to have food, shelter. And so how do we take this fundamental need and make sure that it's accessible for everyone? In this economic system that we exist in, how do we do that? And so the actual Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, and it was passed in the month of April. And with many people, I don't know if they know it or not, but it's not commonly discussed, is that the first Civil Rights Act for the United States was passed back in 1866, and it was passed in the month of April too. So I don't know if that's just a coincidence or not, but it's a good point to highlight, given that this is, April, National Fair Housing Month. And so the Fair Housing Act specifically was set up. It was the third Civil Rights Act legislation. It was the final piece of the Civil Rights Act era of legislation that was passed. And it was initially set up to deal with discrimination based on race and national origin, but it's been expanded to include also familial status and disability as well. And, today, actually the most common form of discrimination that we see in housing here in Alabama really is based on disability or familial status. Some of these larger issues like segregation in housing and things like that, those types of things aren't really reported to, for instance, here in North Alabama, we have the Fair Housing Center of North Alabama, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And they process a lot of these complaints as well. Obviously, those complaints can go directly to HUD too.
Right.
But this nonprofit works in partnership with HUD. They're funded through HUD, and they receive complaints. And most of the complaints that they receive are about failure of landlords to provide reasonable accommodations to somebody with a disability, or basically saying they don't want to take on a certain type of risk with having children or certain types of family structures, and those types of things, can be legal. And so that's important to make sure that we put that information out there, because in many instances, what I find, and this is something that goes back to the mortgage crisis, is that a lot of times when individuals are in these situations, they really just fault themselves.
Right.
And maybe, we all have autonomy and ability to kind of control what we do, but there's a larger system, there's a macro system that we individually exist in. And if we put that information out there, then we can educate folks on, what their rights are, and then they may have an opportunity to assert them if they know.
Yeah, this goes way beyond just the typical landlord-tenant bickering and issues.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it gets a lot less press than it should.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say good morning to Mitch out in California. Thank you, Mitch, for tuning in for a few minutes. My mom's watching. Apparently, I have a question for you, Richard.
Great.
How can a person qualify for fair housing? And I guess that just let's just dive into
Right.
to what people who may be watching this, whether it's live or later on, where do they even start?
Yeah, ideally the goal is, and the way the law is written, is that we all should really qualify. We all should have access to equitable housing. Doesn't mean we all have the same size house, the same square footage,
Mm-hmm.
but it does mean that we have, quality housing that is habitable. And to me, I look at quality of life issues too, in terms of crime, and really education is the big issue to me. I think if you live in a neighborhood, you're paying your taxes,
Mm-hmm.
property taxes or whatnot, then you should have access to quality schools that, put your children in a position to go out and not just be able to obtain a job, or hopefully they could become an entrepreneur, but also to be a quality member of society, to be an educated, informed citizen.
And it seems to be, at least from Birmingham's perspective, in the years I've lived close
Mm-hmm.
to downtown, that's an ongoing issue, not just for Birmingham, but for any city of any size.
That's true.
But one of the things that I'm encouraged by, at least in the last couple of months, and maybe somebody's doing some better PR,
Mm-hmm.
is we're seeing some great stories coming through the city of Birmingham about the Birmingham City School, middle school and high school kids and their accomplishments. I know that Mayor Woodfin had always had some sports teams down there lately, but there's been some other children who really had some great accomplishments, and they're being highlighted through social media. I love seeing those stories. And I want to say good morning to Martin.
Hey, Martin, how's it going? Martin's one of the attorneys I work with a lot. If I have a question, I'll call and text him, and he's always really quick to respond and really helpful. And it's good to have a network of attorneys like that with you as well, Bernard, and your brother, David, as well. It just makes all of us better, and the profession better overall too.
It does. And going back to your eloquent description of what's going on from a fair housing standpoint and needs. And I know lots of people in their ways are part of either individual or groups or organizations. They're all trying, at least it appears, for a common good here.
That's right.
And that's just for a better quality of life. But it doesn't seem that the people it's a lot of head scratching, because there's no perfect answers. It's just everybody trying to either push their own agenda or the agenda of others. But at least the North Alabama Housing, I don't have the proper name.
The Fair Housing Center for North Alabama.
Correct. At least it sounds like they're an organized entity that can help individuals.
That's right.
Is that where somebody might start if they have issues?
You can, and you can just, we'll leave their contact information in the comments later, but it's the Fair Housing Center of North Alabama, and Lila Hackett is the director there. She was our first guest this month, the first Sunday of this month, and came and spoke with us, and she would be a good person to go. You could call over there and speak with her. She has 2 or 3 people to help her with processing, but she's very accessible as well. And she's been involved in the fair housing industry for probably 20 years or more at this point. And a lot of times, like you said, Bernard, sometimes folks will call in with a landlord-tenant issue. And sometimes a landlord-tenant issue can also be a fair housing issue, meaning that the Fair Housing Act can apply to it. But sometimes that'll just be based on Alabama state law. But they can make that decision for you, and they have cooperating attorneys that if it's necessary to litigate it or even write a letter from the law firm, a lot of times the Fair Housing Center can handle those issues directly.
But people are going to be worried about, people who may be watching, I'm not contacting a lawyer because as soon as I pick up the phone, I'm on the clock and it's going to cost me a lot of money.
Yeah, well, that's not necessarily the case, and especially in this type of practice area with public interest law. And for me, we always do an initial consultation for no charge. We have to assess what the issue is,
Right.
before we can even know whether or not it's something that we can help you with. And so other practice areas may not work that way. I understand family law sometimes different in some other areas with business consulting is different. But for the way we set up our practice with the public interest firm, in particular with these type of fair housing issues, we'll do a free consultation at the Fair Housing Center of North Alabama. There's no fees involved. Like I said, they're funded through the federal government. They write grants and they're able to receive their funding that way. So that's one way. Another guest that we had on our show, which was, it was the third Sunday of the month of April, was Alethea House. And I was really proud of that show because I had my younger sister on the show too. And she's a graduate from Vanderbilt, and then she also moved here to Birmingham.
Anchor down, that's my school.
That's right. That's right. And so then she moved here to Birmingham and obtained her master's at UAB. And then she started working at Alethea House while she was obtaining her master's. And she's been there for like 2 or 3 years now. And she's one of their top grant writers. And she came on the show with the director, with one of the directors there, Gloria Howard, and discussed what Alethea House does. And Alethea House helps individuals who are dealing with substance abuse. They have separate housing for men and separate housing for women. They have an outpatient type of treatment, but they also have, they provide residences, and they help these individuals acquire housing. So that was the link between this month. And what I really wanted to do is try to look at creative ways to solve these issues and not always look to, I'm a lawyer, I don't mind filing lawsuits, that's fine, but I think there's so many other opportunities for us to go out and be problem solvers in the community. And I don't know everything. There's so many topics that I don't know about it. So what I try to do is identify experts, and then bring that information together in a way that can be useful for my clients. And so, if you are having any type of housing issue related to maybe you just can't find housing that's affordable to you, or maybe you feel like you couldn't find housing because of some type of substance abuse problem, or based on your familial status or another disability, which substance abuse would be a disability, would fall into that category, then I would look at calling, contacting Alethea House or the Fair Housing Center of North Alabama. And of course, you could call me too, and I could try to redirect you, but or maybe it's something I could help with. But those would be two of the first options here in Alabama that I would look to, because Alethea House covers the entire gambit of the state. They do so much positive work. My sister just recently told me that they've written a grant for Dallas County, for Selma, to have a family drug court program.
Oh, wow.
I think it was like a $1.25 million grant over 5 years. So that was a really big success for them. And I think, anytime you're dealing with families, that's always going to be directly related to housing, because a lot of times individuals can get caught up with some type of possession charge based on an addiction. You remove that one source of income out of the house, and then that takes away that stability.
That's right.
Yeah.
Everything crumbles, or can crumble.
That's
out of
right.
That.
Yeah.
I want to say good morning to Cornell and Alyssa. Thank you guys for tuning in for a few minutes. Another resource that I just thought about, I had Nancy Yarborough on the show a few weeks ago with Volunteer Lawyers Birmingham. Nancy gave a great interview telling about all the services that they offer. And if you have questions about landlord-tenant or any other legal issues that you may have, you can go there. And they've also another great resource that they've got. And I want to thank Eva for putting the link, the website to the Fair Housing Center of North Alabama, as well as to the Alethea House. I appreciate you doing that, Eva. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Richard, let's kind of pivot for just a minute,
Okay.
and let's talk about where are we going? Where are you going with the show right now? We've got we're at the last of April. You've been going really hard for the last 6 months, and been very successful with a lot of different interesting topics and interesting guests. And I know you're always looking forward to that next interview. At least I know I do for each Tuesday. But tell us if there's anything in store that you want to share about the show.
Well, so I think the next month, for the month of May, we're going to be focusing on introducing some of the new judges, some of the judges that are new to the bench. I'm a member of the Birmingham Bar Association and the Magic City Bar Association. And one of the one of the individuals that is kind of coordinating community outreach for the Magic City Bar Association thought that it'd be a good idea for us to have those guests on the show. And I really took that as a, as a compliment to be able to be recommended to have the judges on the show and interact with them. And I think it's good for their constituents and the public in general to just be able to hear from the judges outside of them sitting on the bench, so they can, see that they're, people just like us, and to get a good feel of them. So I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks of May, given if the judges are available, then we'll be speaking about just speaking to them, getting to know them, and whatever information they want to share about their background, they'll be able to do so. So that'll be our next focus. And I'm also going to do a segment on municipal law.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have an attorney, Edward May II, on the show. And Edward May II is someone who was elected to be the mayor of the city of Fairfield. And, what I would just call political shenanigans have resulted in him being removed from office. And he's going to come on the show. He's an expert on municipal law and talk about just some of the fundamentals of the different forms of government that a municipality can operate under.
That so many people just, they may not be fully informed. Everybody may have heard the term municipal court, but what goes on? What's there? And I think that by introducing the judges and introducing municipal court, it breaks down some of those barriers, because the average person who doesn't communicate with lawyers, all they do is they may see movies or TV, and that's not the real world. The lawyers and judges are just like everybody else. They have their issues too, but I think that that's just so great that you're having them to come on in the upcoming weeks and getting to know the judges a little better and finding out what goes on at municipal court.
Definitely. And all those TV dramas around lawyers, you never see anyone pulling an all-nighter just preparing for a deposition or reading 1,000 pages for trial. You don't see those aspects of it.
In my world, there's no aha or gotcha moments. Maybe I'm not in the right area of law for that, but I don't mind not having those.
Mm-hmm.
But Richard, I can't thank you enough. This has been fun for me. I hope that you folks have learned a little bit more about Richard and his practice and the radio program that he's got, and also about the Fair Housing Month that's going on. And please don't hesitate after this show ends to reach out to Richard. We'll put all of his contact information in there. Richard, anything in closing? I know now we could talk about Alabama football. We may lose part of our audience, so maybe we'll close that for another day. Right. But anything, that's right. Anything else you want to share?
Thank you for for having this platform, putting this information out there just on a regular basis to just to educate the public, and just for the sake of having conversation. I think that's important, and we need to have more conversations to bring people together. It promotes more understanding, and I think it's one of those things where I really believe we have to focus on empowering each other, not really work on someone else to come in and save us. And these type of shows, these type of segments, it may seem small. I think it has a large impact, though.
It certainly can. And I appreciate all that you do on your show as well. Guys, I could sit here and talk to this fellow all day long, but we all got some other stuff to do today. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of NOMBERG Law Live. As we do, we try to come to you every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will catch you another time. Be well.
Bye.